Your phone runs at close to the speed of light. Your brain runs at 120 meters per second. That's not a small difference. That's a factor of roughly 2.5 million. By the logic of raw speed, your brain should be catastrophically outperformed by every piece of silicon ever manufactured, and yet it isn't. The 3-pound biological machine in your skull still outperforms every computer ever built at creativity, contextual understanding, physical navigation, social reasoning, and adaptability. So the question isn't whether you're a computer. The question is, what kind of computation is so powerful that it works brilliantly at a speed that would make any chip designer laugh? I'm Paul Dirac. Let's think about this precisely. Start with the individual unit, because the brain as computer analogy breaks down immediately when you look at what a single neuron actually does, and the breakdown is interesting. A transistor is binary, on or off, 1 or 0. It receives a voltage, compares it to a threshold, outputs a state. No ambiguity, no history, no context. It's the simplest possible decision-making element, and that simplicity is what makes it fast and reliable. A neuron is nothing like this. A single neuron receives inputs from thousands of other neurons simultaneously, anywhere from 1,000 to 100,000 synaptic connections, depending on the neuron type. Some of those inputs are excitatory. They push the neuron toward firing. Some are inhibitory. They push it away. The neuron doesn't just count the inputs, it integrates them, weighting each one by the current strength of that synapse, factoring in the timing of recent activity, responding to the chemical environment of the surrounding fluid. This integration happens continuously across the entire branching structure of the dendrites in a process that is analog, not digital. No thresholds yet, just ongoing, weighted summation. Then, if the integrated signal crosses a threshold at the neuron's cell body, it fires. A discrete output from continuous input. One decision made by a massively parallel analog process. Each neuron is less like a transistor and more like a tiny, continuously updating, massively parallel voting machine, integrating thousands of voices before casting a single decisive vote. Now, what actually happens when it fires? The action potential. The signal that travels down the axon. This is the part most people picture as electricity moving through a wire. It isn't, not even close. Your neurons maintain a voltage difference across their membranes using ion pumps, active protein machines that continuously push sodium ions out and pull potassium ions in against concentration gradients at real metabolic cost. The result? The inside of the neuron is negatively charged relative to the outside by about 70 millivolts. This is the resting potential. The neuron is primed. When the threshold is reached, voltage-gated sodium channels open at the initial segment of the axon. Sodium ions, positively charged at higher concentration outside, rush in. The local membrane potential flips from negative to positive. This change in voltage triggers the sodium channels in the adjacent patch of membrane to open, and the adjacent patch to that, and so on, a wave of sequential ion channel opening propagating down the axon like falling dominoes. Not electrons flowing through metal, a wave of electrochemical state change moving through biological tissue. After each section fires, the sodium channels close and potassium channels open. Potassium rushes out, the membrane repolarizes, and the ion pumps work to restore the original gradients for the next signal. Every action potential costs energy. Every thought is metabolically expensive. The speed of this domino wave in unmyelinated axons is between 0.5 and 2 meters per second. Fast enough for a small worm, not fast enough for a vertebrate nervous system trying to coordinate a body. Enter myelin. Myelin is a fatty insulating sheath wrapped around axons by glial cells, the non-neuronal support cells of the nervous system, which outnumber neurons significantly. The sheath isn't continuous. It wraps in segments with periodic bare gaps called nodes of Ranvier. And this architecture does something clever. It forces the action potential to jump. Rather than propagating continuously along the membrane, the signal leaps from node to node, a process called saltatory conduction, from the Latin for jump. The result? Conduction speeds up to 120 meters per second in the fastest myelinated fibers. Energy cost per signal drops dramatically because ion exchange only happens at the nodes rather than along the entire axon length. And axons can be much thinner, saving space, while achieving the same speed. Myelin is, in engineering terms, an extraordinary optimization. It allows large, fast, energy-efficient nervous systems to exist in bodies with finite energy budgets and finite skull volumes. What happens when myelin fails? Multiple sclerosis. In MS, the immune system attacks myelin sheaths. Signals slow. They misfire. They fail to arrive. The consequences, depending on which axons are affected, range from muscle weakness and coordination problems to visual disturbances, fatigue, and cognitive disruption. Myelin isn't peripheral to how the brain works. It's structural to it. Now, scale. Individual neuron speed matters less than you might think, because the brain's power is not in its individual units, it's in their connectivity. 86 billion neurons, each connected to thousands of others on average. Some neurons in the cerebellum connect to hundreds of thousands. Total synaptic connections, roughly 100 trillion. That number is worth sitting with. 100 trillion connections, each with a variable strength, each modifiable by experience. And this is where the computer analogy requires fundamental revision. In a silicon computer, the hardware is fixed. The software runs on it. They're separate. The brain makes no such distinction. When you learn something, when you practice a skill, form a memory, change a habit, you are physically restructuring the synaptic connections of your neural network. Synapses strengthen with use, they weaken with disuse. New connections form, old ones prune away. The architecture rewires itself based on what it processes. The hardware is the software. The software is the hardware. They're the same thing, inseparable, co-evolving. No silicon computer does this, not remotely. Now, the speed question revisited. Why does slow work? Silicon computers are fast and serial. They execute instructions sequentially, one after another, at billions of operations per second. They're extraordinary at tasks that decompose into sequences of precise logical steps. Arithmetic, database lookup, sorting, chess move calculation. But they're architecturally constrained by their sequentiality. The brain is slow and massively parallel. When you recognize a face, no sequential algorithm runs. Instead, the visual cortex processes edges, orientations, contrasts simultaneously across the whole visual field. The temporal lobe integrates those into object representations. Memory systems compare against stored patterns. Emotional systems flag familiarity or threat. All of this happens simultaneously across multiple brain regions, with each region's output feeding others, converging on recognition in roughly 150 milliseconds. The slowness of individual neurons is compensated, more than compensated, by the sheer scale of simultaneous processing. The architecture is the performance. The brain doesn't overcome its speed limitation. It makes the speed limitation irrelevant by doing billions of things at once. And it does all of this on 20 watts, less than a dim incandescent bulb. For that power budget, the brain performs computations of a complexity no artificial system approaches. It achieves this through sparse coding. At any moment, only a small fraction of neurons are active. Through precise, efficient synaptic chemistry, through a structural organization that minimizes total wiring length while maximizing the connectivity that matters, by computations per watt, by any efficiency metric we can define, the brain is the most efficient information processor known to exist. AI researchers spend enormous effort trying to approach this efficiency. The gap remains large. Now, where does the analogy hold and where does it break? Silicon computers beat the brain at arithmetic, at chess, at certain image classification tasks, given enough training data, at data storage and retrieval speed, at executing precise, well-defined algorithms reliably. The brain beats every computer at common sense reasoning, at navigating genuinely novel situations, at understanding language rather than predicting it, at physical navigation of complex, unpredictable environments, at social cognition, reading intentions, inferring emotions, modeling other minds, at creativity in the genuine sense, producing things that are new not just statistically but conceptually. And here's the distinction I think matters most. A language model predicts the next token based on statistical patterns in training data. It doesn't understand the sentence. A chess engine evaluates positions and finds optimal moves. It doesn't know it's playing chess. These systems process information with extraordinary sophistication, without constructing meaning from that information. The brain doesn't just process, it contextualizes. It embeds information in a web of embodied experience, emotional significance, temporal narrative, and relational meaning that gives signals significance beyond their content. Whether that distinction between processing and understanding, between computation and meaning, is a difference of degree or a difference of kind, is one of the most actively contested questions in cognitive science and philosophy of mind. I don't think it's settled. I think anyone who tells you it's settled is moving faster than the evidence. And now the thing I've been building toward, the thing the computer analogy cannot capture, no matter how sophisticated we make it. When your neurons fire, when ion channels open and close, when domino waves propagate down myelinated axons, when neurotransmitters cross synaptic gaps, when networks activate and suppress each other, there is something it is like to be you having that happen. There is a felt quality to seeing red, a texture to the experience of hearing music. Something it is like to understand an idea, that specific sensation of a concept clicking into place. something it is like to remember a person you loved. This, the subjective, first-person, qualitative dimension of neural computation, has no analogue in silicon. Not because we haven't yet built a sufficiently powerful computer, because we don't understand the relationship between physical computation and subjective experience. We don't know why any physical process should feel like anything from the inside. We can describe every ion channel, every synaptic weight, every network activation pattern, and we still won't have described the experience of understanding what those patterns mean. You are a biological computer in a meaningful sense. Information processing is central to everything you do. The electrochemical machinery is real, measurable, and extraordinary. But you are something that silicon, as far as we can determine, is not. A system that knows it's computing, a process that experiences itself, a biological machine that looks at its own mechanism and wonders what it is. That gap between the electrochemical signal and the experience of thought, between the ion wave traveling at 120 meters per second and the feeling of understanding, is the deepest unsolved problem in all of science, the hard problem of consciousness. And it doesn't live in a laboratory or a philosophy seminar. It lives inside you, right now, firing.